A great and lovely afternoon to you all. I welcome you to another exciting edition of Tosin and Friends. I am Tosin Akinride, and I'm your regular host for this program. And also joining me today is Professor Pat Utomi, who is a renowned professor of political economics, on the topic entitled Surveying Nigeria's Economic Recovery Plans During the Post-COVID Era. Guess what, folks? We will also have Professor Pat Utomi speak on issues that deals with how Nigeria's image seems to have been dented by a few Nigerians in the diaspora. So good morning, sir.
Hey, morning. Glad to be here.
Yeah, and how are you doing today, sir? And how are you keeping safe during this period?
I'm trying very hard, obeying as much as possible every rule that is thrown out there, social distancing, washing my hands, all of them.
I see. That's very, very incredible, sir. So let's begin the interview now. Yeah, so the first question I'll be asking you is, reports from international organizations like the IMF and also the National Bureau of Statistics, NBS, have predicted that the country's economy would contract by 3.4%. How does this translate into affecting an average person in the country?
Well, it does translate in terms of how much poorer we'll all become.
Okay.
Number of the more vulnerable people in our society, women, those that are young and co, will slip further back into poverty, sadly. But generally, the quality of life of most of us will be affected. But we can work to turn things around by creating work in new areas. Sadly, we think of relief generally from perspective of the same things that created the problem. A rent system, government says it's going to create 774,000 jobs. That means, I guess, 10,000 or whatever number, 1,000 in every local government. And then they are quarreling and fighting over who will decide. This is not job creation. This is distribution of money. Because eventually, you're not getting the best talents to put themselves to work, to create more value. So, unfortunately, it's a bit of a merry-go-round. But that's sadly the quality of thinking that we are seeing, and that's where we are.
Yeah, thank you very much, Professor Pat Utomi. Yeah, so the next question I'll be asking you, which is more like a follow-up on the previous question, is what are the economic recovery steps the country should take in order to escape the looming recession during the post-COVID era, considering the fact that we do not have fiscal, monetary, and also market buffers?
Well, that is part of the shame of what has also happened to us. When the 2008 global financial crisis hit us, we had buffers. We had significant savings, which the rise in oil prices and President Obasanjo's insistence on saving some of that money against the preference of the governors generally helped provide us some buffer. And so it was easier for us to survive the global financial crisis and the speed of contagion that followed the subprime crisis in the United States of America and the bundles of securities that had been sold around the world. However, this present crisis that we are going into, we have no buffers. The savings have been all consumed. The profligacy of the political class has left us completely vulnerable. And what is even more frightening is that even as we were going into the anticipated recession, oil prices dropping, even below the budget benchmark. National Assembly was still going to appropriate money to buy more flashy cars for themselves, we're going to spend more money to fix their building, all kinds. It just gets to a point you wonder the level of the disconnect between the political class and economic reality and the Nigerian people and their troubles. So we really have a national crisis of unimaginable proportions.
Okay, thank you very much. So you made reference to Obasanjo's administration, and then I would like you to compare and contrast Obasanjo's administration and other administrations, particularly civilian administrations, in terms of how they've been able to handle the nation's economic conditions.
Well, I mean, I'm not sure that we're going to profit too much by doing that. There are many things you can criticize the Obasanjo governments of. I was around when he was military head of state. I was around when he was civilian president. He's done some things well. He's always had a knack for reining things in when things are getting out of hand. It was under his watch that we had a low profile when he was military head of state, when government caught and the head of state himself was moving around in a Peugeot 504, but became the official car of government at every level. We're going down, of course, to smaller cars and lower levels. So you remember him for that. In his role as civilian president, when he first tried to implement a policy of saving, I can say that I was one of those who gave him a hard time and pushed for that, because I was involved in some ways in an advisory role when he was a candidate. I actually chaired the committee of his policy advisors. And when things were not going too well in '99, in spite of our disagreements, he called me back for a conversation. And part of the outcome of that conversation, I like to think, was some of the savings policies, which upset many of the governors. I had to try and get one of my friends who was commissioner for finance, who was complaining about it and saying, how can I support Obasanjo to take the government's money? I said to him, look, it's not just the state government's money, it's everybody's money, and it's going to be saved for the good of everybody. And the structure of these kinds of savings is your typical mutual funds, where everybody's share of the pool of money is retained in the investment. So if the investment ends 10 naira and your share of it is 10%, then you know that you will have 1 naira for your state. Anyway, but people didn't listen to intelligent arguments. Governors were trying very hard to get as much money to spend. Well, eventually, even Obasanjo himself, I think, began to buckle. In the end, that's why we are where we are. We couldn't make the savings, and we are now being buffered. There's no buffer, so storms are hitting us from everywhere. And even the Sovereign Wealth Fund is a very small fund.
Yeah.
But at least something could have been worse.
Yeah. So, economic experts like yourself have been clamoring for the diversification of the Nigerian economy. What are the viable sectors of the economy you think the country could actually delve into?
Well, there's so many different ways to approach diversifying the base of the economy. Clearly, the one that everybody goes back to quite quickly is agriculture. But not agriculture in the old style way. My general development strategy emphasis today is what in structural economics you call latent comparative advantage.
Could you break that down?
Yeah, latent comparative advantage deals with taking your factor endowments. What did God gift you with? Yeah, maybe in agriculture, for example, we are the biggest producers of cassava in the world without any effort, but we're not getting much out of cassava, the value chain. Sesame seed grows in the wild in most of north central Nigeria, but they use it to make soup and stuff like that. Now this is serious money. So when you are applying this strategy of development, what it means is that you massively invest in, create an industrial policy that gives some protection to the evolution of that sector, not a broad industrial policy of the kind of tariff barriers that we had under import substitution industrialization. So you take, say, cassava, then you encourage growing cassava. Not Basanjo, for example, there was one terrible mistake. There was a lot of noise was made about cassava. Farmers went and grew cassava, and the next year, you know, there was nobody to buy the cassava. It was getting rotten. There were nothing in place. Next year, they stopped growing cassava. Now, when you take a value chain approach, which is what latent comparative advantage and value chains focus on, you say, okay, we want to become dominant players in the world. We want to lead the world in the cassava value chain in the next X number of years. It means that even the education of the children who live in the areas that produce cassava will emphasize, you know, knowledge about the cassava value chain. They will create companies that will process, that will do different things, getting more and more value. Those who trade cassava will emerge. Those who will take the byproducts into global, this is starch, best quality starch. Who are those using in the world? Who are those selling it to them? All of those constitute part of the cassava value chain. So we should take a number of endowments in agriculture, for example. I've mentioned two, sesame seeds, cassava, plantain, so many. And say these ones we know we can lead the world in. And this is how we invest in becoming leaders in the world. This is how we ensure that we protect that value chain in its beginning. Then as it gets more competitive, step out of protecting them, but growth is taking place into the global economy. High quality jobs are coming because you are adding value and so on and so forth. But there are other spaces beyond agriculture. In the tech space, I mean, people underestimate what young Nigerians have been doing and can do, given the right ecosystems, access to knowledge, capital, and all of that. The clusters that can come out of here can become centers for the world. When Mark Zuckerberg got on a plane and arrived Lagos, it wasn't because he was going on holidays, because he saw prospects. He saw how well have we tried to manage that to make ourselves significant players in this global digital economy that is emerging. So that's a territory that we can explore, that we have not done so much about. We need to explore intra-African trades. We can become hubs for so many things. I feel sad that even though COVID-19 is getting us to social distance and all of that, a country like Nigeria can prosper enormously from tourism. We have hundreds of kilometers of coastline. But hotels in Nigeria are not places you go to and want to go back. So we need to change all of that. Airports in Nigeria are not the friendliest places. If you're going to be playing in tourism, people should be happy to land at your airport. In airports, people land and want to leave. Several of those kinds of areas that we could play big in that we're not playing. We could be the conference capital of the world. Dubai decided we want to go from being a desert village to becoming the city center of the world, and they became. There's no reason why we cannot be that. Even in transportation, Nigeria could easily be, given its location, the hub for flights into Africa. Everybody lands in some designated airport in Nigeria, whether it's Lagos, Abuja, whatever, and from there to different parts of West Central Africa. So there are really opportunities that we have not even tried to explore.
I see. Thank you very much for that very extensive explanation you provided. But then I would like you to speak on the problems associated with the certification of our country's agricultural products. I mean, we've had issues whereby we export our products to the European countries and then they get to return it.
Yeah, it's because we do not professionalize things. There is no reason why we cannot work the processes right. We know what the expectations are, we know what the standards are, but this business of trying to cut corners is what leads to those problems. I've seen people who try to export, run agric airlines, literally, and they have created opportunities for developing the basis for certification, but bureaucracy and the way we run things just seem to get in the way. I know a couple of such efforts. So really, it is a matter of finding champions who can make things happen in various sectors. Unfortunately for us, there has been a very sad democratization of mediocrity in our country. Everything is who know who, man know man. Person who has no clue about an area gets appointed to lead that area. So all he's looking at is the opportunity for the pursuit of legal plunder. You know, so he doesn't really get it, the consequence of the significance of that role for the well-being of all. He's just looking for what he can get out of it. You know, people are struggling to be on board, struggling to be on. In the end, we suboptimize. It becomes a lose-lose game. You know, it can be a win-win game, but we end up lose-lose because we're trying to win, lose. You know, very sad.
Yeah. So speaking on the looming economic recession our country could actually go into, some persons have suggested that the federal government should order the CBN to print more naira in order to avert the impending economic crisis. Yeah. So I'm seeing you smiling. What are the pros and cons of this decision?
Have you heard of a country called Zimbabwe?
Yeah.
Okay. They learned to print money. And they printed enough of it that you needed a wheelbarrow. And this is not taken from Zimbabwe, this was actually taken from Germany. During the Weimar Republic, you needed a wheelbarrow to truck to the market, the cash to buy a loaf of bread.
Wow.
You know, when it gets that bad.
Sorry, is it not synonymous? Okay, yeah, Zimbabwe, yeah.
Zimbabwe went over the wall on that. After a while, there was no point in having a Zimbabwean currency. Just find a dollar that you can use and all of that. So we need to be careful when we recommend such things. There's a Keynesian perspective on this kind of times. There are those who disapprove of Keynes totally, but Keynes does have his important contribution. But that is based on the fact that markets can be imperfect and that governments can intervene to help markets. And so in the days of the Great Depression in America and working the way out of depression, and Franklin Delano Roosevelt's presidency in America, part of the Keynesian type advice is it's better to build a road to nowhere so that people will keep working than, you know, not to. Yes, there should be some government stimulus activity. We see it from time to time, stimulus in the economy. But how you do that also matters. If you just throw money into the system, you can throw it in a way that it produces the kind of inflationary consequence that you cannot manage. So it should be done in a way that generates as much production as possible.
I see. So, yeah, recent happenings in the economy have shown that Nigeria's dependence on volatile crude oil markets has thrown the country into a deeper mess by forcing it to readjust its budget to to portray current economic realities. Yeah. What are the other numerous socio-economic implications attached to the fall of crude oil prices, contextualizing it within the Nigerian socio-economic framework?
Well, unfortunately for us, we worked ourselves into an economy in which we became so totally dependent on crude oil, the so-called monoculture economy. I like often to tell a story about, we used to have a group that was called ACE, Association of Concerned Economists. We used to meet in Lagos, in an office not too far from here, back in those days. And one of the elders of the group was the now late Chief Rashid Badamosi, who was Commissioner for Economic Development here in Lagos many back in the Gowon era. And in many conversations that we used to have, I used to point to the error in the development of Nigeria's oil economy. I used to speak frequently to the fact that we were neglecting to invest appropriately in developing gas, and too much politics got in the way of the attempt to develop an LNG in Nigeria. Chief Rashid Badamosi eventually became Minister for Economic Planning. I think they were called Secretary during the Abdul Salam Abubakar interregnum. And he led Nigeria's OPEC delegation because Nigeria did not have an oil minister as such. I think General Abdul Salam held to the portfolio of oil himself. So in 1998, oil prices had dropped to single digits. And they went to an OPEC meeting where everybody was scrambling and shouting to get an increase in their quota so that they could earn some more revenues. Now, Chief Badamosi told me later, of course, that when he was observing the minister of the oil minister of Indonesia, showed no interest in the conversation. As long as we were struggling for increased quota, he was doodling. So during the tea break, he went to him and said, "Are you not interested in getting more quota?" The minister looked at him and said, "Well, it's you Nigerians who I'm not sure you know what you are doing. Well, crude oil for us is there. No, it doesn't matter so much. We'll make a lot more money from gas, and you Nigerians we are supposed to be ahead of us on that. And there's no quota on gas." Chief Badamosi said that the moment he said that, he just shouted, "Pat!" Because I had said that so frequently that it was coming out of his ears. So as soon as he landed Lagos, he called me. He said, "You won't believe what just happened at this OPEC meeting." I said, "What?" And he told me this story. He said, "Oh, well, you see, Nigeria was still on one train, LNG, and Indonesia reached 7. And Nigeria was supposed to be ahead of Indonesia on that track." So Nigeria's story is when I talk about it, I say it's a heartbreaker. I don't know how else to put it. I like to think as a patriot, this country has hurt a lot. It's very hurting for those who know. Watched it go from, well. Anyway, bottom line is crude oil is not going to be a very important factor in our future. First of all, fossil fuels are getting out of fashion. Very soon, even motor vehicles will be running on other than fossil fuels. And even if we had more of the crude oil, which is a finite resource that is exhausting, we wouldn't even have people who have much use for them. So what will we be doing then, when everything in this country has been about crude oil, and share the money? That's going to be a tragedy for our country. So it is important that we learn to begin to do things differently. In fact, to begin to pretend that crude oil doesn't exist anymore. I have argued for a long time, anybody who knows me has been around my conversations on this matter, that, and it goes back more than 20-something years, that we should actually save most of the money that comes in from crude oil and not put into our budget process. Because that's what's killed production in our country. We just let them pay oil money and let us, if we had 3 different accounts and only a small fraction of the revenues from crude oil go into the distributable pool fund, the so-called FAC account. A good part of what comes from it should go into a stabilization fund. That is a fund that you invest in near money instruments. So it's readily available when there's a swing, very bad swing in oil prices. You can use that to ensure that the budget process remains stable. And then, of course, above a certain price, everything should go into a sovereign wealth fund, or what is often called a future fund. We have neglected to do this. We're paying the price for it. I feel depressed that Nigeria does not read history. Nigerians don't learn history. History is replete with countries that behave like Nigerian elite is behaving today and where they are presently.
Can you give us examples of those countries?
Yeah, 2 quick examples. 200-300 years ago, one of the countries that made the most money in the world was Spain. Spain made this money especially from gold being brought back by the conquistadores who had occupied Latin America. And so Spain was rich. You know, the Spanish elite were like the way Nigerian elite are today, voluble consumers of everything. If they were private jets in those days, they would have had several. The countries, the so-called low countries, Switzerland, Belgium, Netherlands, and co., didn't have the kind of money Spain was making. But they invested in their young people, in their education. A couple of years down the line, the gold was not coming back to Spain, just like oil would not be coming back to Nigeria in a few years. And Spain would become one of the poorest countries in Europe relative to those countries that had no resources, like the Netherlands. Bigger heartbreaker. It's a country called Haiti. People don't actually realize that 1789, Haiti had the highest per capita income in the world. Haiti. Today is the poorest country in the Western Hemisphere. But in the age of plantations, Haiti was the great plantation economy. Unfortunately, in rebelling against their French overlords and becoming independent, there was a conspiracy against Spain by Western powers, against Haiti by Western powers. And even France was extorting reparations from Haiti. But more importantly, as the world industrialized, Haiti remained a plantation economy. The result is impoverishment of Haiti.
Yeah, thank you very much for this very, very educative explanation you provided. So yeah, I know I'm taking you back to the diversification of Nigeria's economy. You spoke about gas. I want to ask you about the socioeconomic implication of gas flaring in the southern region of our country. It's just like we are burning money. I want to ask you that question.
From many perspectives, yes. The first perspective is burning money. Second, damaging the environment.
Yeah.
In a terrible way, if you go around oil producing areas, I mean, night becomes day because of the burning of gas flaring, and the heat unbearable. And people live around those places. The cancers and all the things that will come from those things will be health issues for generations.
Yeah.
So that's a very sad side effect of the Nigerian economic order.
Yeah, I see. So, Professor Pat, we'll be having another serious conversation about how Nigerian youth in particular seem to take interest in committing financial fraud, financial fraudulent activities around the world. So the first question I would like to ask you is, news reports of late have shown Nigerian youths are rapidly seeming to take interest in all forms of financial related crimes. What are the foundational problems attached to these rapid developments?
Well, first of all, there's been a collapse of culture in Nigeria. Central to who you are as a human person is character. As a secondary school in Owerri, whose motto I like very much, I ran into this when I was reading a book written by on a biography of an alumnus of that school, Elder Felix Ohiwere, many years ago. And that motto says, when wealth is lost, nothing is lost. When health is lost, something is lost. When character is lost, all is lost. So true. So true, because I know many people who have been very rich and lost all of it and come back. I like to joke about 20 years or so ago, I used to teach one of my classes in Lagos Business School with a video of an American billionaire who had gone bankrupt. And he was coming out of a tube station in New York and saw a homeless man and said, "Oh my God, look at that man. He's worth, at the very worst, he's worth zero. But look at me, I'm worth far less than zero." 3 years later, the man was a billionaire again. Today, that man is the president of the United States of America, Donald Trump.
Wow.
So, what's the point? Wealth can come and go. It's not the biggest thing in health. But you look at Steve Jobs, all the money he could in the world, and he was dying, nothing could be done. When health is lost, something is lost. But when character is lost, it's all gone. And that's what has happened to our country. A combination of factors, including how governments looted the treasury and individuals who had no character, had tons of money. This collapse of culture affected the values of a generation. Until we can recover that generation that's lost in those values, sadly, what we'll be seeing are these things going on around the world, where Nigerian young men believing that the only thing that matters is money, do all kinds of things. In the end, this creates a perception of national character, of Nigerians as fraudsters. And this will make transaction costs difficult for Nigeria and for Nigerians, which means that we will deepen poverty because of this behavior. If in the short run, one or two of them get away with it for a short period, buy fancy, silly cars, in the end, it will make their cousins poorer. Because once you come to a transaction and say, he's Nigerian, people want to hedge. And the costs of that hedging will make you less competitive than those who don't have to hedge with. These things have to be learned. I set up this Center for Values in Leadership to help young people learn these things. But we've struggled for years to keep this place running, to have impact on people's lives. The system doesn't even believe in supporting things like this. So, we just got to pray and hope. But we are on a dangerous, dangerous course as a country.
Okay, thank you very much. Considering the level of high-profile fraudulent cases like that of Invictus Obi and Hush Puppy, what would you say went wrong? Would you trace that to our politicians? Would you say it's as a result of the actions of the past military rulers we've had?
They all constitute part of what I call the collapse of culture.
Yeah.
Yeah, includes also the media celebrating people whose sources of wealth we don't know. There's a good friend of mine from Shagamu who tells the story of how in 1958 or so, one of the neighbors, a policeman, was seen knocking on their door around 5 o'clock in the morning. And for weeks, months, everybody was ostracized, kept away from the family, and the family was wondering what they had done. Until one day somebody said, You Elewons, police came to your house. Say, which Elewon, okay. What? Ah! Our cousin, who is a policeman in Kano, was coming back and his boss or whatever stopped around 4 a.m. and he came to the house. Nobody came to arrest us, so. And that's the kind of culture we used to have. Now you can go in and out of jail, doesn't matter, so long as you can spray money around, people will hail you. It's not sustainable. That is a collapse of culture. And so they watch soldiers with unbelievable amounts of money abroad. We're still recovering Abacha loot till today. I think it's insanity. I mean, why would anybody want that kind of money anyway? What are they going to do with it? How many lifetimes? You know? Besides the fact that it's wrong to take what's not yours, fundamentally. Then you deal with the current political class. I mean, you know, when you are told that the official salary of a senator is 700 and something thousand, but he gets another 12 or 13 million every month. We need to scrap all these institutions. They are not adding value to Nigeria. You know, we need a new way of doing things. But more importantly, their conduct in the public arena is what has given young people the disposition. Well, wait a minute, if they're stealing in the National Assembly, stealing in the governor's mansion, stealing in the villa, so what's wrong with our stealing too? That's where we are.
I see. So finally, what's your general advice to Nigerian youths based on the issues we've spoken about so far?
Well, it's nothing like having a clear vision of where you want to go in life. Begin with the end in mind, as Stephen Covey would say. Integrity is everything. If you've got integrity and you have a work ethic, it will eventually come to you. If you create value as you go along, it may take a little longer. Deferred gratification is what makes for sustainable success. Think of satisfaction in what you do before you think of perception of success. That way you will go very far.
Thank you very much, Professor Pat Utomi. Thanks. And people, remember to follow and subscribe our YouTube channel. Thank you.